Ta-da!
Hello gamers, Matthew here from Grey Army Gaming in Lund, Sweden. If you are now watching this concluding outro video, you have made it to the end of the Battle for the Borderlands series, the Battle for the Borderlands tournament. And what I would like to do now is just briefly have a bit of a recap about the tournament and what happened. If you have not yet watched the Battle for the Borderlands series, I should warn you there will be some spoilers in here. We will talk about the results of the tournament. So if you haven't watched that, the first 25 battles, you may want to save this video for later. Let's start out with just some brief reflections about how the tournament went. First of all, leadership. As I was playing, I realized that leadership is so important, perhaps the most important thing here for your warband. I saw this over and over again with the Skaven factions. Each time I played Skaven, it inevitably happened the same way. One or two of them were killed on the battlefield, and it set off a series of panic tests, and the leadership was so poor with the Skaven clan rats and the Skaven warriors that they just inevitably, half of their army just failed their tests and fled off the battlefield. And as you can see, the Skaven didn't do very well in the Battle for the Borderlands series because of that. Even with their leaders, I mean, we had trouble getting their leadership above 7, which is just the average. So that wasn't very good, and Skaven really suffered because of that. The goblins also, I think, had some issues with that. Goblins and night goblins. Related to that, though, we saw how important then banners became, because banners allowed us then to re-roll these failed leadership tests. And that actually saved the Skaven and the goblins and night goblins quite a few times. It really sort of cut back on the losses that they would have had otherwise had they not had a banner in play. So banners were important. Of course, not for all factions. For the High Elves, who have really high leadership, and especially for the Dwarves, who have super high leadership, we didn't typically bring banners for them, and we didn't need it because, I mean, they're rolling 8s, 9s, and 10s on their leadership. So we didn't need to bring banners. We could give their kit to something else instead of the regimental banner. Another thing is musicians. Typically, we didn't use musicians very much either. It was very seldom the case that I had to actually come to the point where I would take a route test and then have to shake it again and have a musician save us there. More likely, it was the case that that one warband just sort of destroyed the other, and it was pretty clear that there was going to be a loss there with or without a musician. So yeah, I guess musicians probably don't need it. Would give some other kit to some other dogs of war than the musician, and it's probably not worth your money there. A second thing that I really noticed is that with respect to warband construction, it was better to have a few strong warriors than many weak warriors. So once again, to go back to Skaven and Goblin, I mean, we had consistently a lot of Skaven and Goblin. But they were fairly weak, so having a large number of them did not necessarily help. Although the Night Goblins did okay because they were able to sort of swarm in on their enemies at a couple times, and we did get some good rolls out of them, especially from their archers. So having more figurines there did help the Night Goblins, but that was kind of an exception that proved the rule. The stronger factions, and you saw this, the stronger, smaller factions, such as the Swordmasters, the Savage Orcs, the Miners, the Dwarf Miners, the White Lions, these were the factions, the warbands that did much better, and they had typically a very small footprint on the battlefield, but they were quite strong, quite powerful with their attacks, and quite powerful in their saves. They had good armor, and they had good wards. That brings us to our next point, third. Armor. Armor seemed to be a must here. It was less true when we got to the end, when we had these really powerful hard hitters like the Swordmasters that were able to sort of cut through any kind of armor. But in the beginning, for sure, the armor was what really helped some of these warbands make it further than they may have otherwise done. I'm thinking here of the Inner Circle Knights. There were only 4 of them. But they had, remember, they had barding, they had full plate armor, they had shield, and they were mounted. So they were doing 2+ saves against strength 3 or less attacks. And that really helped them do pretty well against a lot of the early warbands. Of course, later on, the Inner Circle Knights really took a fall from the Sword Masters of Hoth. And there you can see how the Sword Masters, they're just strength. Their strength and the extra strength from their great weapons was able to just basically turn that armor into tinfoil. So armor was good in the beginning, not so important maybe at the end. As we sort of got into stronger war bands. And fourth, we can just mention something briefly about the way that the game played out. I thought the Regiment of Renown rules were fantastic. I really love these rules. I haven't really focused much on Mordheim. It's a pretty complicated rule set, but this is so simple. Just builds on the 8th edition, and I really appreciate it. Really easy scenario to play with the route test. It just made it a lot of fun, and we could come to the game without having a whole lot of extra baggage as far as rules were concerned. And that made it really, I think, smooth gameplay. It made it a lot of fun. In addition, I was really impressed with the kit. Those little cards that I gave to each of our Dogs of War and to our leaders. The kit made it really fun because each time we went into a new game, a new battle, we could give different kits to our different Dogs of War and leaders based on who we were going up against. So very often the dwarves, for example, they had some of the boots of haste, which gave them some extra movement. Sometimes we had armor-piercing weapons, for example, if we knew we were going up against the Sword Masters, or if we were going up against the Inner Circle Knights. So it was fun to be able to look through all that different kit and to sort of change it up and to really customize each battle so that it would be more interesting and more fun, and I guess more fair, we could say. And finally, I think the leader upgrades were really cool. And this is something similar to Mordheim, but it was really fun, I think, to be able to upgrade your leader and give your leader sort of skill benefits or experience benefits after each battle. And that just really makes sense with how battles would play out. I mean, you play it out over this long course of 25 different battles, and as you go, you should be getting better and better. You should be developing in your skills. And it was fun to see who was developing and in which direction. For example, with the Sword Masters, our Blade Lord there at the end, Meldus the Seeker. I mean, he was so equipped, decked out by the end. It was really cool to see. He had 4 attacks, for example. I mean, he was like strength 6. And just he was just out there wrecking shop because he had so much skill and so much experience. And that was really a cool element of this whole game, and part of what I think is fun about playing a 25-game series is you have a chance to actually see how figurines and characters develop and how they get better and better. So that was pretty much my reflections here on this conclusion, on this outro. All in all, I think that this was a very successful series, Battle for the Borderlands, and it is definitely worth doing again in another variation or another form. So if you're interested in following any of the rule set or doing anything similar, feel free to send me an email or contact me on our greyarmygaming.com website, and I would be happy with you to talk more with you about this series and any ideas you have for other series. Well, thank you for joining us here for this series, Battle for the Borderlands. And thank you for joining us here today at Grey Army Gaming, where Grey can always play.